Henry shifted the last cardboard box off the truck bed, wincing at the chill that clung to the late autumn air. Behind him, Anna stood with Lucy, who shivered noticeably despite her thick sweater. It was the off-season, and only a few scattered locals remained in the vicinity of the lake. The rest had migrated to warmer spots or returned to the bustle of the city. For Henry, the solitude was welcome. He'd taken leave from his hectic job so he could spend more time with his wife and 17-year-old daughter. The lakeside cabin, perched just over a gentle slope, seemed the perfect spot for healing old familial wounds. It didn't matter to Henry that the caretaker, a wiry old man with a battered baseball cap, had given them a peculiar look when they'd arrived that morning. "You sure you want to stay out here this time of year?" he'd asked, concern flickering in his weathered gaze. Anna had offered a polite smile, pressing a tip into the man's roughened palm. "We'll be fine," she said. And that was that. The caretaker mumbled that they could find him down the road at a makeshift workshop if they needed anything, then hobbled away without another word. Lucy stood at the cabin's threshold, looking uneasy. She was a city kid through and through, having never spent more than a weekend in a rural setting. Yet something about the lake's still surface and the tall pines swaying in the wind held her attention. Or perhaps it was the yawning silence that unsettled her. Before stepping inside, she let out a quiet sigh. Anna wrapped an arm around Lucy's shoulders. "It'll be good for all of us," she murmured, as if reassuring them both. Inside, the cabin echoed with emptiness. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and the interior smelled of old wood and mothball, but to Henry, it felt oddly comforting. He moved through the rooms, envisioning fireside evenings and lazy mornings with coffee steaming in the crisp, cold air. In the living area, a wide window looked out onto the water. Even in the dim afternoon light, the lake held a haunting allure. It was a mirror of silver and gray, unmoved by the slight breeze that shivered through the trees. Lucy peered outside, while Anna busied herself starting a fire in the stone fireplace. Shadows lengthened across the lake as dusk approached. The flickering orange glow from the fire illuminated the edges of the cabin, sending dancing shapes along the walls. The hush was thick, broken only by the crackle of the burning wood. A strange sense of foreboding settled over Lucy's shoulders. She couldn't pinpoint a reason for it, maybe the emptiness, maybe how quickly the daylight vanished behind the ridgelines. All she knew was that an unease was taking root, and the quiet felt too deep. During their first night, Henry was woken by a low rustling sound just outside the bedroom window. He eased himself out of the covers to investigate. Beneath the faint moonlight, he discerned a figure near the lake shore. For a moment, his breath caught. Could it be an intruder? His heart thudded, and he held his breath, pressed against the cold glass. But when the moon slid out completely from behind the clouds, he saw the shape more clearly. It was a woman, standing ankle-deep in the water, her eyes fixed on the lake's surface. Henry first thought it might be a neighbor or some misguided wanderer, yet something was off. Her dress seemed out of place, like something from decades past. The woman's hair hung limp and soaked. "Hello?" Henry whispered. His breath fogged the window. The figure didn't move. Then, in a blink, she was gone, as if swallowed by the night. Henry stood there, perplexed. He was certain he hadn't imagined her, but he also wasn't sure how to explain the abrupt disappearance. The next morning, Lucy came to the kitchen, pale-faced. "Mom," she muttered, voice trembling, "did you or Dad come into my room last night?" Anna, amid preparing toast, shook her head. "No, sweetie, we were both asleep." Lucy hesitated. "I felt like someone was sitting on my bed," she said, voice subdued. "When I turned on the light, no one was there, but I swear I heard breathing." Anna's hand stilled on the countertop. A quick flicker of concern crossed her features, but she tried to assuage Lucy's anxiety with logic. Must have been the wind in the rafters, or some old pipe malfunction in a place this aged, but Lucy remained unconvinced. Determined to lighten the mood, Henry suggested a walk around the lake. The day was bright, though the sun offered no significant warmth. Dry leaves and pine needles crackled under their shoes as they made their way down the path. The breeze carried a faint scent of decay, as though last summer's bloom had all but vanished. replaced by the somber side of nature. Henry and Anna held hands, discussing potential improvements to the cabin. Lucy trudged behind, arms folded against the chill, eyes drifting from one side of the forest to the other. When they reached a slip of shoreline, Henry noticed something half buried in the sand. Brushing aside the coarse grains, he uncovered an old locket. It was tarnished and rusted around the clasp. Inside, an old-fashioned photo of a young woman, her hair pinned back, eyes downcast as though weighed by sorrow. Lucy peered over his shoulder. "Creepy," she murmured. Anna knelt to look. "We could show it to the caretaker," she suggested. "He might know who it belongs to." Henry pocketed the locket, feeling an odd tremor in his chest. The woman reminded him of the figure he'd seen the night before, though he wasn't quite ready to mention that. After they returned to the cabin, Henry found the caretaker at his workshop, a ramshackle hut near the main road. The man squinted at the locket, turning it over in his gnarled hands. "Don't recognize it specifically," he muttered, "though I recall talk of a tragedy some years back." He lowered his voice to a near whisper. "This lake ain't always been so peaceful. Lots of folks drowned here, or went missing in the deep water." Henry prodded him for more details, but the caretaker crossed his arms and retreated into a stern silence. He offered only a cryptic warning. "If you see or hear strange things at night, best not to go investigating. Let things be." The caretaker's words whipped around Henry's mind as he headed back to the cabin. On the deck, he found Lucy staring out across the lake. Her eyes were fixed on the reflection of the clouds, drifting along the surface. Lost in thought, she barely registered her father's soft footsteps. When Henry touched her shoulder, she jumped. "Dad," Lucy whispered, "I don't like how quiet it is. It's like the whole place is holding its breath." Henry forced a smile, but he couldn't deny that something about the lake's stillness felt expectant, poised on the brink. At dusk that evening, they sat in the living room, the fire crackling with renewed vigor. Anna flipped through a dated photo album she'd found in a cupboard, presumably left by the cabin's previous owner. The pages were yellowed, the pictures faded. One image showed a small group of people gathered by the water, accompanied by a boat. The edges of the photo were nearly disintegrated, but Anna could make out a stark-faced young woman who looked eerily like the figure Henry saw. She was turned away from the camera, her expression partially hidden. Lucy pointed to her. "She looks so sad," she commented. Henry's stomach felt tight. He said nothing, but his mind reeled with the uncanny resemblance to the woman from his midnight vision. Their second night proved no calmer than the first. Henry woke again to soft weeping. This time it seemed to reverberate through the entire cabin. He checked on Anna, found her asleep, and then stepped out into the hallway. The keening sound led him past Lucy's closed door and toward the narrow stairs that descended to the basement. He'd only glanced at the basement during the day, deciding it was too damp and musty for any practical use. Yet now he followed the sound, compelled by a feeling he couldn't name. The basement's bare bulb flickered. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with old tools and fishing gear. The floor was wet in places, as if water seeped in from the lakeside. The crying had grown faint. Henry explored around, shining a flashlight into corners. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught his eye, a figure slipping through the far wall as though it were a mere mist. He darted the light forward, but there was nothing there. The hair on his arm stood up. Heart pounding, Henry retreated, half incredulous and half terrified that he'd just seen a phantom. Come morning, Henry wrestled with whether to tell Anna. He decided to confide in her, regardless of how irrational it sounded. She listened intently, her expression oscillating between concern and disbelief. Although she was a practical woman by nature, Anna had seen enough oddities recently, Lucy's experiences, Henry's sightings, to pause before rationalizing away his claims. They sat together, each trying to make sense of this intangible presence. Were they dealing with ghosts? Or was there an underlying force from the lake's history that refused to remain buried? Later that day, they decided to search through some old boxes stored in a small attic space, hoping for any usable clues. Lucy joined them, rummaging through dusty photo frames, water-stained letters, and scraps of clothing. At the bottom of a trunk, they found a ledger filled with newspaper clippings, all meticulously pasted onto yellowing pages. Headlines told grim stories: tragedy at Lakeside, boat capsizes, several lost, local woman disappears without a trace, fiancé drowns attempting rescue. The articles spanned decades, but a particular name kept arising: Evelyn Swan. In one clipping, a black and white photograph showed Evelyn Swan posed by the lake, clad in a simple dress similar to the one Henry had witnessed on the lake shore. The lines on her face spoke of heartbreak, and the caption explained that her fiancé drowned under mysterious circumstances just weeks before their wedding. There were rumors that her grief drove her to the lake every night until she too vanished one stormy evening. Locals superstitiously claimed Evelyn's spirit lingered, restless, tethered to the waters that had taken her beloved. Anna read the text aloud, her voice trembling. Lucy swallowed hard. "Dad, that must be the woman you saw." Henry nodded, lips taut. A heavy quiet settled over them, as each wondered what might happen next. Over the following days, sightings increased. Lucy would wake from nightmares, certain she heard splashing outside. Anna glimpsed silhouettes moving along the shoreline at twilight, and more than once, Henry thought he spotted a pale hand pressed against the window, only to find nothing there upon closer inspection. Their nerves were on edge, frayed by lack of proper sleep and growing unease. The caretaker's warning pounded in Henry's thoughts. Better not investigate. But how could they ignore it? Something in that lake was calling, beckoning them to uncover a more sinister truth. Anna encouraged Henry to speak once more with the caretaker, to see if he might reveal something beyond cryptic warnings. That afternoon, Henry trudged through a light rain to the workshop, only to find it locked. He peered through the window, but the space was dark. A neighbor, perhaps the only other off-season occupant, passed by in a truck and mentioned that the caretaker might be out running errands or gone for the weekend. Henry thanked him half-heartedly, dismayed by the lack of progress. Lucy, meanwhile, tried to distract herself by exploring the woods behind the cabin. She felt the raw tension at home was overwhelming. Crunching through piles of leaves, she picked her way between slender birch trees until she came across a small clearing. At its center stood a simple stone marker, weather-worn and covered in moss. It was too small to be a shared cemetery plot, more like a secluded memorial or a lonely grave. Carefully brushing aside the moss, Lucy uncovered a single name etched in crude letters: Evelyn. Her pulse soared. Beneath it, a date nearly effaced by time. She squatted in front of the stone, a strange mix of fear and pity flooding her. Could someone have erected this marker for Evelyn Swan? Or was it for a different person entirely? She hurried back to the cabin to share her discovery. Anna and Henry exchanged solemn glances. This was no coincidence. Realizing the caretaker was absent, Henry proposed that they handle the situation on their own. They decided to gather that night in the living room, armed with candles, determined to confront whatever haunted them. If the ghosts were indeed trapped souls, perhaps acknowledging them, speaking aloud, might bring some measure of peace. Night came swiftly, as though the sun were a reluctant visitor. They lit candles and turned off the cabin's lights. The flickering glow cast long, twisting shadows on the walls. The lake outside was a perfect abyss, reflecting only the faint starlight. The three of them huddled together, hearts hammering. Henry cleared his throat and spoke into the thick silence, voice echoing against the cabin's wooden walls. "Evelyn Swan, we know you're here. We know you lost someone to the lake. If you can hear us—" He trailed off, uncertain how to continue. Anna's hand tightened on his arm. For a long stretch, nothing happened. Then the temperature shifted, dropping noticeably. Lucy let out a startled breath as her candle flame wavered. Faintly at first, a woman's weeping filled the room, barely audible above the hush of the night. It built slowly, as if traveling across decades of sorrow. Henry's skin prickled as a cold breeze brushed past him, though all doors and windows were shut tight. The weeping rose, layered with heartbreak that demanded to be felt. Anna's composure cracked. She began speaking softly, apologizing for whatever torment had kept Evelyn from peace. She spoke of empathy and asked how they could help. Halfway through Anna's trembling appeal, the wailing turned to hushed sobbing. A shape appeared by the window, translucent and trembling with sorrow. Lucy swallowed a scream. The figure's face was faint, as though glimpsed through fog, but her eyes were unmistakably filled with anguish. The cabin walls seemed to groan all at once. A gust snuffed out the candles, plunging them into darkness. Lucy and Anna clutched Henry's hands, and they felt something brushing past them like a swirl of chilled air. Henry's mind raced. "Evelyn," he repeated in the dark, "if you're here, we're listening. We want to help." The weeping faded, replaced by a heartbeat of silence that stretched on ominously, long enough for them to wonder if she'd gone. Then a different sound permeated the blackness, a rush of water. It was as if they were standing beside a waterfall. Strange, frantic splashing came next, accompanied by muffled screams. Lucy screamed in fright, and Anna fumbled for a flashlight, her hand trembling so violently it took her several tries to switch it on. When the beam pierced the darkness, they saw the living room as it was, undisturbed. No water anywhere. But they carried that sound in their ears, seared into their minds, and they knew it was some echo from the lake's tragedy. Shaken, they agreed to keep vigil through the night, worried that sleep would make them vulnerable. They built a roaring fire for warmth, staying in the glow and whispering reassurances to one another. At some undefined hour, Lucy dozed off. Henry watched over her, thinking how his daughter was too young to bear such horrors. He gave a silent vow that he would find a way to break whatever tethered the spirit to this place. By dawn, the atmosphere felt calmer, as if the night's storm of energies had abated. Strangely enough, the caretaker was waiting on the front porch when Henry opened the door in the morning. His eyes flicked from Henry's drawn expression to Anna's exhausted face. "You look like you've had a rough night," the old man said, giving a slow nod. "I told you to leave well enough alone, but maybe it's too late now." He came inside without waiting for an invitation. The caretaker's step was firm, and he seemed oddly resolute, as though driven by a sense of responsibility. Settling into the armchair, he explained that his grandfather had once owned this cabin, passing it down with stories of Evelyn's relentless wandering. Versions of the tale differed, but they agreed on one point. Evelyn was searching for her fiancé's remains, or some tangible token of closure. "Some folks say you can quell the spirit by returning what was lost to her," the caretaker said, eyes flicking to Lucy. "Any idea what that might be?" Henry thought of the tarnished locket with the young woman's portrait. Could that be her missing keepsake? Or was there something else lost beneath the waters? They mentioned the memorial stone Lucy found in the woods. The caretaker's weathered face softened in realization. That's where they found her footprints leading into the water the night she vanished. Some local tried to give her a resting spot on land by putting up that stone. After poring over the old ledger clippings again, they noticed a mention of Evelyn's fiancé wearing a ring engraved with both of their initials. The ring was never recovered. Legend held that it remained somewhere at the bottom of the lake, tying Evelyn's spirit to the tragedy. But how could they retrieve such a relic, especially after so many decades? The caretaker hammered his cane on the floor. "I've got an old metal detector," he said. "Folks around here sometimes fish things out of the shallows. If you're bold enough, you can try." Henry wanted to jump at the idea, but unease prickled at his neck. The caretaker's gaze was intense, as though warning him that an attempt to meddle further might provoke the restless spirit. Yet they had come this far. Perhaps delivering Evelyn's fiancé's ring to that memorial stone would set Evelyn free. Lucy, despite her fear, insisted they try. She couldn't bear another night of nightmares. Anna reluctantly agreed. Armed with the metal detector and a pair of waders, Henry spent the rest of the morning scanning the shallows near the spot where the caretaker claimed the boat had capsized so many years ago. The water was frigid, lapping at Henry's shins with icy precision. His every step sank into the muddy bottom, releasing the pungent odor of algae and decay. The caretaker stood on the shore, occasionally calling out pointers. Lucy hovered at the water's edge, eyes darting around as though expecting a ghostly hand to rise from the depths. For a long while there was nothing but the static chatter of the metal detector. And then Just after midday, a faint beep sounded. Henry's pulse quickened. Carefully, he prodded the lake bed with a small shovel until something clinked. Kneeling in the cold water, he sifted through filmy sediment. He extracted a slender band of metal. Even caked in mud, its shape was unmistakable. A ring. Henry scrambled back to shore, nearly tripping in excitement. Under the caretaker's watchful eye, he rinsed the ring in a bucket of water, revealing a faint engraving, E+R. Anna, Lucy, and Henry stared at each other in amazement. It felt as if the air around them shifted, no longer so heavy. The caretaker nodded solemnly. "Guess you found it." Without waiting, they walked together through the forest to the modest clearing. Lucy knelt by the stone, running a hand gently across Evelyn's name. Henry placed the ring at the base of the memorial. Anna cleared her throat and spoke softly, "We return what was lost, in the hopes that you find peace." A hush descended, broken only by the rustle of leaves. In that hush, they felt something. A presence. A sigh of relief, echoing like a breeze through the branches. A faint figure seemed to glimmer beyond the tree line for just a moment. Lucy was sure she saw Evelyn turn her head, a soft gratitude in her gaze. Then she faded, as though a curtain had closed on a tragic story, refusing to remain in the realm of the living. They returned to the cabin in the late afternoon, hearts lighter. For the first time since they arrived, Lucy smiled without an edge of fear. That evening they made dinner, telling jokes around the table, each holding on to the sense of calm that had replaced the oppressive tension of the previous nights. When dusk came, the family braced themselves for a possible return of ghostly sounds, but the fire crackled warmly and no spectral shapes emerged at the windows. The lake's surface was undisturbed, reflecting the pale glow of the crescent moon in a tranquil shimmer. Henry stayed up late, gazing out the large window at the peaceful waters. He felt a lingering sorrow for Evelyn, for the heartbreak she endured in the decades she wandered. Yet he also felt hopeful. Perhaps the past could finally rest. He turned off the lights and crept into bed beside Anna, feeling her steady, relaxed breathing for the first time since they'd arrived. The next morning, a sense of renewal flowed through the cabin. Anna ventured out for a walk with Lucy while Henry sipped coffee on the porch. He saw the caretaker drive by in his rusted pickup, tipping his cap in a subtle gesture of respect or farewell. Soon they would pack their belongings and decide whether to stay longer or head home. Whatever they chose, Henry knew their bond as a family had been tested, and in facing those shadows, they had grown closer. There were no more apparitions, no more late-night wailing or cryptic warnings. Nature itself seemed to breathe easier, free of the lingering sadness. Lucy reported her best night of sleep since arriving, no ghostly presence tugging at her covers. In the bright morning sun, the lake was crystalline, reflecting sky and forest in a serene panorama. As they prepared breakfast, Anna caught Henry's eye. "We did the right thing," she said softly, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek. "Evelyn can rest now." Henry agreed, looking out the window one last time. In his mind's eye, he imagined Evelyn's final silhouette reflected on the water, relieved of the weight that had anchored her so long. He closed his eyes for a moment, sending a silent goodbye and a hope that wherever she was, it was a place of gentle light and calm waters.